Nobody in hip-hop saw this one coming. Out of nowhere, with absolutely zero warning, Ray J logged on his social media and declared war on three of the most well-known figures in New York rap history. We are not talking about a mild disagreement or a passive-aggressive subliminal post. We are talking about a man who got on a live stream and told the entire internet he was going to physically confront Cameron, Mase, and Shyne, threatened to involve every blood and Crip in Los Angeles, said things about their families so graphic that most outlets cannot even repeat them, and did all of this while recovering from a heart condition that his own mother publicly confirmed could end his life. All because those three men mentioned his sister Brandy on a podcast. And here is the thing that makes this entire saga even more insane. Within 48 hours, every single person involved responded. Shyne put out a statement that was so perfectly crafted it felt like it was written by a diplomat. Because it basically was. Cameron fired back by posting an old video of Ray J getting physically struck by another man in broad daylight. And Brandy, the woman at the center of all of this, the person everyone was supposedly talking about, she finally broke her silence with a statement that did not defend her brother, did not co-sign the chaos, and instead calmly corrected the entire record while announcing a memoir. So buckle in, because this is one of the wildest, most layered, most revealing celebrity beefs of 2026, and it involves everything from 90s nostalgia to street threats to political maneuvering to the uncomfortable question of how women's personal histories get treated as content in the podcast era. If you are watching this right now, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, because we are about to unpack every single angle of this situation that the internet is not telling you. So let us start from the very beginning and set the full table, because context matters more than anything here. Cameron and Mase have a podcast called It Is What It Is. If you have been paying attention to the culture over the last couple of years, you know this show has become one of the most talked about programs in hip-hop media. The format is simple. Two Harlem legends, both of whom had massive careers in the late 90s and early 2000s, sit down and talk about sports, music, culture, and whatever else is on their minds. They bring on guests. They tell stories. And every now and then, the conversation drifts into territory that gets people talking in a very real way. Cameron and Mase go way back. These two were on the same high school basketball team at Manhattan Center before either of them became famous. They have decades of personal history between them, decades of shared experiences in the music industry, and decades of stories that most people have never heard. That is what makes the show work. It is not scripted. It is not polished. It is two guys who have lived extraordinary lives just being themselves on camera. And that raw, unfiltered energy is exactly what draws people in. But it is also exactly what gets them in trouble. This particular episode featured a guest who has lived one of the most extraordinary and complicated lives in the entire history of hip-hop. Shyne. For anyone who might not know the full backstory, Shyne is a rapper from Brooklyn who was signed to Bad Boy Records in the late 90s. He was supposed to be the next big thing. Diddy saw something in him. The industry was watching, and his future looked limitless. And then everything changed in one night. In December of 1999, there was a shooting at Club New York in Manhattan. Shyne was involved. He was arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He served nearly a decade behind bars. When he got out, he was deported to Belize because he was not a United States citizen. And instead of fading into obscurity, instead of letting that be the end of his story, Shyne completely reinvented himself. He got into politics. He ran for office. He won a seat in the Belize House of Representatives in the 2020 general election and served as the leader of the opposition. The man went from being a rapper on Bad Boy to being a legitimate political figure in a Central American country. That is one of the most remarkable second-act stories in entertainment history. So when a person like that sits down on a podcast with two other men from that exact same era, two men who were moving through the same New York music scene at the same time, you already know the conversation is going to be rich. You already know there are going to be stories. And that is exactly what happened. The episode was flowing naturally. They were reminiscing. They were laughing. They were going back and forth the way old friends do when they are looking back at the days that shaped them. And then Cameron steered the conversation toward a topic that seemed harmless enough at the time. He asked about Brandy. Now you have to understand what Brandy represented in the late 90s to fully appreciate why this conversation even happened. Brandy Norwood was not just a singer. She was not just an actress. She was a cultural phenomenon. She had Moesha on UPN, one of the most popular black sitcoms of the decade. She had The Boy Is Mine with Monica, which was one of the biggest singles of 1998 and sparked a rivalry that defined an entire era of R&B. She starred as Cinderella in the groundbreaking 1997 television movie alongside Whitney Houston. She had platinum albums. She was on every magazine cover. She was, in every measurable way, one of the biggest stars on the planet. And she was also a young, beautiful woman navigating all of this fame in an industry filled with men who wanted to be close to her. That is not speculation. That is just the reality of what it was like to be Brandy Norwood in 1998. So when Cameron brought up the topic, Shyne started talking about how Brandy was essentially his dream girl growing up. He said he used to watch her on MTV, watch her on BET, watch Moesha, and think to himself that if he ever made it to the level where he could be in her world, she was the one he wanted to know. He described it with genuine admiration. There was nothing vulgar about it. There was nothing disrespectful about the way he told the story. He was a kid from Brooklyn with big ambitions, and Brandy represented something aspirational to him. She was part of the dream. And when he finally made it into the music industry, when he finally got to that level, he tried to pursue a connection with her. But what Shyne did not know at the time, or at least did not fully understand, was that Mase was already in the picture. Mase was already the one who had the established connection with Brandy. And this is where Shyne dropped what became one of the most memorable lines from the entire interview. He used a basketball analogy. He said Mase was Shaq, the MVP, the champion, the one who had the starting position locked down. And Shyne said he was Kobe, the young guy coming off the bench, trying to earn a spot on the championship team. And he even noted, with a knowing laugh, no pun intended, because there were rumors at that time that Kobe Bryant himself was also connected to Brandy. So you had potentially 3 different men, all orbiting the same woman during the same period, none of them fully aware of the complete picture. Shyne also mentioned that there was a mutual friend who was essentially acting as an informant. This person was telling Brandy everything Shyne was doing, everywhere he was going, everything he was saying about her, which obviously complicated any attempt he might have made to build something with her. The whole thing was a tangled web of young fame, overlapping social circles, and the kind of chaotic romantic dynamics that happen when everyone in an industry knows each other. But the key thing, and this cannot be stressed enough, is that the tone of the conversation was lighthearted. Mase was laughing. Shyne was laughing. Cameron was laughing. Nobody was being crude. Nobody was going into graphic detail. Nobody was using language that would typically be considered disrespectful. It was 2 grown men looking back at what it was like being young and famous and trying to navigate the complicated social landscape of late 90s hip-hop and R&B. That was the sum total of what happened on that podcast. But the internet does not operate on nuance. The internet operates on clips. It operates on thumbnails. It operates on headlines that are designed to provoke the maximum emotional reaction in the shortest possible time. And within hours of the episode going up, the clips were everywhere. Short segments were carved out of the longer conversation, stripped of all context, and pushed into feeds with captions that made it sound like 3 men were sitting on a podcast bragging about sleeping with Brandy and treating her name like a joke. That is not what happened. But the truth stopped matching the moment those clips started circulating. Because the person who saw them, the person who reacted to the most inflammatory possible interpretation of those clips, was Brandy's younger brother. And that person was Ray J. This is where the entire dynamic of this story shifts from a casual podcast conversation into something much more volatile. Ray J went on social media, and he went completely nuclear. For those unfamiliar with Ray J's history on the internet, this was not entirely out of character, but the intensity of this particular episode was remarkable even by his standards. He got on a live stream and started going after all 3 of them simultaneously. His exact words, which were reported across multiple outlets including Complex and Hot 97, included him saying, "Keep my sister's name out of your mouth, and if not, I'm gonna slap the daylights out of you when I see you." He called them the 3 Stooges. He said when he sees them in person, they better not be wearing skirts. He told them to pull their panties up. He said he knows where they hang out in Las Vegas, walking around the Wynn Hotel, acting like they are winning. He mocked their finances. He implied they have to do thousands of shows just to earn a check. And then the threats escalated far beyond anything related to the original podcast conversation. He started talking about violating everybody connected to them, their families, their wives, their mothers. He said things so graphic and so extreme that most news outlets covering the story could not even quote him directly. He invoked Bloods and Crips. He said he would not tolerate the disrespect, and neither would Los Angeles. He turned a podcast conversation about 90s dating into something that sounded like he was calling for a bicoastal street war. Now, it is important to stop here and address something that a lot of the internet commentary is glossing over. Ray J has been dealing with a serious and potentially life-threatening health condition. In early 2026, it was widely reported that Ray J was hospitalized with pneumonia, which led to the discovery that he was suffering from cardiomyopathy, a condition that weakens the heart muscle and makes it difficult for the heart to pump blood effectively. Reports indicated that his heart was functioning at only about 25% capacity. His own mother, Sonia Norwood, went on Facebook to address the situation, saying, "This is not fake. It's not a hoax." In response to people who were accusing Ray J of exaggerating his condition for attention, Ray J himself stated that his heart problems were connected to excessive drinking and substance use. Brandy reportedly stepped in to help cover his medical bills. The family was rallying around him. The entire situation was serious and, according to multiple sources, genuinely scary. And yet here he was, just weeks later, on a live stream making violent threats and working himself into an absolute frenzy over a podcast clip. That juxtaposition is something that cannot be ignored when trying to understand this situation fully. You have a man who was reportedly told by doctors that his time might be limited, and instead of conserving his energy, instead of focusing on his recovery, he chose to spend it declaring war on 3 men who were mostly just telling old stories. That either tells you how deeply he cares about protecting his sister, or it tells you something about the way Ray J processes conflict and seeks attention, or it tells you both of those things simultaneously. And depending on which interpretation you lean toward, your opinion of this entire situation changes dramatically. Let us talk about the responses now, because this is where the individual personalities of everyone involved become crystal clear. Shyne went first. And the way Shyne handled this was a masterclass in communication. He did not match Ray J's energy. He did not respond with threats. He did not go on his own live stream and start yelling. He posted a photograph of himself standing with both Ray J and Brandy, smiling together like old friends, and he wrote a caption that said, "Let the record reflect I did not hit it first." Most respectfully, he tagged Mase, Cameron, and the It Is What It Is show account. Think about how brilliantly constructed that response was. It accomplished multiple objectives at the same time with absolute precision. First, it directly corrected the narrative that was spiraling out of control online. The internet had taken the podcast conversation and spun it into a story about Shyne bragging about sleeping with Brandy. His response was essentially saying that is not what happened, and he never even had a physical relationship with her. Second, it demonstrated that he was completely unbothered by Ray J's threats. He did not cower. He did not apologize. He did not beg for peace. He acknowledged the situation, stated his position clearly, and moved on with his life. Third, and this is the subtle part that most people missed, by saying he did not hit it first, Shyne was implicitly redirecting the conversation. Because if he did not, then someone else did. And suddenly the focus shifts away from Shyne entirely and toward the other people who were allegedly involved with Brandy during that period. That is not the response of an angry rapper. That is the response of a politician. Which, again, is exactly what Shyne became. The man literally serves in government. And you could see that experience reflected in every word of his response. Low-key, measured, strategic, and devastatingly effective. Then there was Cameron. And Cameron did what Cameron has been doing for over 2 decades. He turned the whole thing into a spectacle. Instead of addressing the substance of Ray J's complaints, instead of attempting to de-escalate the situation, instead of issuing any kind of measured or conciliatory statement, Cameron went to the It Is What It Is Instagram page and posted a video clip from an old incident in which Ray J was physically struck by another person during an altercation. He posted that clip for the entire world to see, and he captioned it with, "William shouldn't be talking about slapping nobody." Now back to our regular scheduled program. The use of Ray J's government name, William, was deliberate. It was dismissive. It was Cameron's way of saying, I do not even take you seriously enough to use your stage name. And the phrase, back to our regular scheduled program, was his way of communicating that this situation was nothing more than a brief interruption in his day, a mild inconvenience that did not even register as a real conflict in his mind. If you know anything about Cameron's history in hip-hop, this response was entirely predictable. This is a man who has engaged in public conflicts with Jay-Z, Nas, 50 Cent, and numerous other major figures throughout his career. His strategy has always been the same. He does not get emotional. He does not get defensive. He does not engage on his opponent's terms. He laughs. He mocks. He turns the entire thing into entertainment. And that approach, which might seem reckless on the surface, is actually one of the most psychologically devastating ways you can respond to someone who is genuinely angry. Because when you threaten someone and their response is to post a video of you getting hit while making jokes about it, all of your power evaporates. You look like the one who lost control. You look like the one who is emotionally compromised. You become the content instead of the creator of it. And that is exactly the position Cameron put Ray J in. But the most significant response did not come from any of the men involved in this conflict. It came from Brandy herself. And this is the part of the story that changes everything. Within roughly 24 hours of the entire situation blowing up across the internet, Brandy posted a statement on her Instagram that addressed the controversy directly. And what she said was remarkable for what it included and what it conspicuously left out. Her statement read, "In the late 90s, I had a platonic friendship with rapper Shyne. In an unfortunate turn of events, that friendship is now being mischaracterized as we dated. Unequivocally, we did not. I'm not sure why an untrue narrative about a scope of what was a friendship more than 20 years ago is being reshaped during his current media interviews." She then pivoted seamlessly into announcing her upcoming memoir, titled Phases, saying it was time to tell her own truth and debunk the misnomers that people think they know about her life. Let that sink in for a moment. Brandy's response did several things at once, and every single one of them was calculated. First, she flatly denied that she and Shyne ever dated. She described their connection as a platonic friendship and said it was being mischaracterized. That means the entire foundation of the podcast conversation, at least the part involving Shyne, was based on an inaccurate premise. Shyne may have been interested in her. Shyne may have seen her as his dream girl. But according to Brandy herself, it never became anything more than a friendship. Second, and this is critical, she did not mention her brother. She did not thank Ray J for defending her. She did not co-sign his behavior. She did not say anything at all about the threats, the live streams, the insults, or any of the chaos that he created in her name. That silence spoke volumes. It suggested that Brandy may not have wanted or needed Ray J to go to war on her behalf. It suggested that she was perfectly capable of handling the situation herself, in her own way, on her own timeline. And the way she handled it was with grace, precision, and a savvy marketing move that turned an embarrassing viral moment into a promotional opportunity for her memoir. Third, her statement subtly but unmistakably communicated to everyone involved that she controls her own story. Not Ray J, not Shyne, not Cameron, not Mase, not the internet. Her. And that distinction matters enormously in a situation where everyone else had been speaking for her, about her, and over her for 48 straight hours. This brings up something that extends far beyond this specific situation and touches on a pattern that has been repeating itself across hip-hop and entertainment media for years. The way women's personal histories are treated as communal property on podcasts is something the culture desperately needs to reckon with. Think about what happened here in its simplest form. Two men sat on a podcast and casually discussed a woman's dating life from 25 years ago. They framed it as nostalgia. They framed it as lighthearted reminiscing. And in the moment, that is probably exactly what it felt like to them. But the woman they were talking about never consented to having that conversation broadcast to millions of people. She never agreed to have her personal relationships dissected for content. She was not in the room. She was not given the opportunity to provide context, correct inaccuracies, or set boundaries around what was shared. And when the clips went viral, it was her name that trended, not theirs. Her reputation that was being discussed, not theirs. Her personal business that was being picked apart in every comment section and reaction video on the internet, not theirs. This is a pattern that repeats itself constantly. Every other week, there is a podcast somewhere where men are sitting around discussing which women they dated, which women they were with, which women they had access to during their prime. And it is always framed as harmless. It is always framed as just telling stories. But the women in those stories never get to decide how their business is shared. They never get to control the narrative. And when someone like Ray J speaks up about it, even though he went about it in completely the wrong way, the underlying point he is making is not entirely without merit. The question is, why are we still doing this? Why are we still treating women's dating histories as entertainment content? Why are we still sitting on podcasts in 2026 talking about who was special to whom in 1998? Now let us also address the fan reactions because they reveal just how divided the public is on a situation like this. On one side, you have people who fully support Ray J. They argue that any brother would react the same way if he heard three men casually discussing his sister's romantic history on a podcast while laughing about it. One commenter wrote, "They were basically calling his sister a hoe. He has a right to crash out." Another warned, "Never underestimate what a man will do over his sister, especially given how close they are." And there is genuine validity to that perspective. The protective instinct Ray J displayed is something a lot of people can relate to on a fundamental level, regardless of how he chose to express it. On the other side, you have people who think Ray J's entire performance was exactly that, a performance. They point to his long history of using controversy as a vehicle for attention and relevance. They point to the pattern of him going viral for outrageous behavior and then quietly leveraging that visibility for business purposes. One fan wrote, "Ray J has nothing to offer to the world except this. The faster he gets to therapy, the better." Another noted, "Just Ray J talking about being fake tough again." And there is a particularly sharp observation from someone who wrote, "This behavior should be frowned upon. It's goofy behavior. I even feel by responding I'm reinforcing it by contributing to the engagement." That last comment touches on something profound about how the attention economy works. Every reaction, every share, every comment, every video response is fuel. It is engagement. It is algorithmic currency. And by participating in the conversation, even to criticize it, you are feeding the exact machine that created the situation in the first place. There is also something that needs to be said about the broader context of Ray J and Brandy's relationship because it adds another layer to this entire saga. If you have been following the Norwood family over the past couple of years, you know that Ray J and Brandy have not always been on the best of terms. There have been reports that Brandy distanced herself from her brother due to disagreements over his lifestyle choices. Ray J himself acknowledged publicly that he was not being invited to family gatherings and that Brandy had essentially set boundaries with him. And yet, just a few months before this podcast controversy, Ray J surprised Brandy on stage during her tour while she was performing Best Friend. It appeared to be a reconciliation moment, a sign that the siblings were healing their relationship. But some observers noted that it felt more like a public spectacle than a genuine private moment. When you combine all of this with Ray J's recent health struggles, his cardiomyopathy diagnosis, his hospitalization, his own admission that his heart condition was connected to substance abuse, and the fact that Brandy reportedly stepped in to cover his medical bills, you start to see a picture of a family dynamic that is far more complicated than a simple protective brother narrative suggests. Ray J crashing out on Cameron, Mase, and Shyne might have been about defending Brandy, but it might also have been about proving to Brandy that he is still willing to go to war for her. It might have been about demonstrating his value to a sister who has been pulling away from him. It might have been about channeling years of frustration about his own reputation, his own legacy, and his own place in the culture into a fight that felt more righteous than his usual controversies. Or it might have been about all of those things at once. Human motivation is rarely clean and simple, especially when family, fame, ego, and health crises are all swirling together. And then there is Mase, the one person in this entire saga who has said absolutely nothing, which is fascinating because Mase is arguably the person most directly implicated in the original conversation. Shyne said he was trying to get close to Brandy. Mase is the one who actually had the established relationship. Mase is the one who joked on the podcast, "I was special." He came in and wanted to be special too, so I had to let him be special. And yet in the aftermath of Ray J's explosion, Mase has been completely silent. No posts, no videos, no statements, No acknowledgement of the situation whatsoever. You can read that silence two ways. Either Mase recognizes that anything he says at this point will only add fuel to the fire, and he is strategically choosing to let the other participants absorb all of the attention and controversy. Or Mase genuinely does not believe he did anything wrong, because from his perspective, he was reflecting on a relationship he actually had, and he does not owe Ray J an explanation for that. Either way, his silence is working. Because in a situation where Cameron is trolling, Ray J is spiraling, Shyne is doing damage control, and the entire internet is picking sides, the smartest possible move is to do absolutely nothing and let the chaos exhaust itself. That is a disciplined, pastoral approach. And Mase, who became an ordained minister, would know exactly how to execute that strategy. So where does all of this go from here? In a sense, Brandy's statement may have functionally ended the substantive part of this conflict. She corrected the record. She denied the dating narrative. She announced her memoir. She did not validate Ray J's behavior. The conversation now has a definitive answer from the only person whose answer actually matters. But in another sense, this situation has already taken on a life of its own that extends beyond the facts of what happened. It has become a content arc, a serialized narrative playing out across Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and every blog and reaction channel in between. Every new post is another episode. Every new response is another plot twist. And the audience is fully engaged, waiting to see what happens next. Will Cameron say something else? Will Shyne double down? Will Ray J escalate further? Will Mase eventually break his silence? The internet is watching, refreshing, commenting, and sharing in real time. And that might be the most important takeaway from this entire situation. The lines between real life and content have become so blurred that it is genuinely difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. What used to be a private family matter is now a public spectacle. What used to be old stories shared between friends is now podcast material that generates millions of views. What used to be a phone call to settle a disagreement is now a live stream that gets screen recorded, clipped, reposted, and debated by millions of strangers. This is the reality of hip-hop culture, entertainment culture, and internet culture in 2026. Conflicts are not just conflicts anymore. They are content. They are engagement. They are algorithmic fuel. And everyone involved, whether they intended it or not, is a participant in a machine that turns human emotions into clicks. For the podcasters, this is a cautionary tale. When you bring guests on a show and encourage them to share personal stories about other people, you need to understand that those stories have real-world consequences. The people being discussed have families. They have brothers who might log on and see those clips. And not everyone is going to process it calmly. For Ray J, this is a reminder that the moral high ground is something you can occupy at the start of a conflict and completely abandon by the end if you do not know when to stop talking. He began with a legitimate grievance that many people could empathize with. He ended with threats so extreme that even his supporters started backing away. For Brandy, this whole episode is yet another instance of her being pulled into a public conversation she did not initiate, and her response demonstrated exactly why she has maintained the level of respect she has for over 3 decades. She handled it with class, clarity, and intelligence. And for the culture as a whole, this is one more data point in an ongoing conversation about how we talk about women on these platforms, who gets to tell whose story, and what the consequences are when nostalgia crosses the line into exploitation. So with all of that laid out, let me know in the comments what you think. Who handled this situation the best? Do you think Ray J had every right to go off the way he did, or did he completely undermine his own point by taking it too far? Was Shyne's response the most calculated and effective of everyone involved? What do you make of Cameron posting that video? And the biggest question hanging over all of this, now that Brandy has spoken and flatly denied the dating narrative, does that change how you view the original podcast conversation? Drop your thoughts below because the comment section on this topic has been absolutely wild. If you made it to this point in the video, I genuinely appreciate you. Leave a like and subscribe because it helps this channel grow and it allows us to keep bringing you breakdowns like this one. I will see you in the next one.